very good afternoon to all. You're watching News 9. I'm Neha Bhan. We continue to bring you the latest from battleground Israel. It has been 9 days since an unprecedented attack was initiated by Hamas terrorists on the residents of southern Israel, following their firing of thousands of rockets into the Israeli territory. This ignited an unprovoked war. In response, Israel has undertaken numerous counter-offensives in Gaza, where many Hamas terrorists have sought refuge. Now let's get you the latest on day 9. What exactly has been happening on day 9 of the Israel-Hamas war? Their death toll is over 3,500. Over 3,500 people have lost their lives, while more than 10,000 people have been wounded. Both sides have suffered casualty. The death toll in the Israel-Hamas war stands at over 3,500. Gazans flee as Israel prepares to invade Gaza. Now, there are reports that Israel is preparing for a ground invasion in the northern part of Gaza, which includes the Gaza city itself. Israel has asked around 1.1 million people to evacuate from northern Gaza and move towards the southern part of the strip. Their last remaining exit for Gazans is through Egypt's Rafah crossing. We're going to come to it a little later. But for those, in fact, who have just joined us, here is the latest on Israel-Hamas war. On the day 9 of the Israel-Hamas war, there is the last remaining exit for Gazans is through the Egypt's Rafah crossing. The question is, will Egypt open its doors for the refugees? United States, meanwhile, and the UK have also asked their citizens to get closer to Rafah so that they can escape when Egypt allows people to cross over. There, the Israeli Defense Forces saying about 330 wanted persons have been arrested, while over 190 associated with Hamas have also been arrested by the Israeli Defense Forces. Do remember that this was an unprovoked war started by the Hamas, the terrorist organization, and it will be ended by Israel. That's what the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said. Pro-Palestinian rallies being carried out in Australia and Tokyo. Thousands of people have taken part in these rallies. And that's, in fact, their Israel military has said, we're ready for next stage in fight against Hamas. Israeli military here has said this comes close to close on the lines of what Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israel Prime Minister, also stated. He said that Israel is ready to take the fight to the next, in fact, stage. Now, speaking about the Rafah crossing, as Israel prepares for a potential invasion of Gaza, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt stands as the sole feasible means of evacuating people from the war zone. Nonetheless, it remains uncertain whether this crossing will be functional and accessible to refugees. Do remember that the Rafah border is currently closed. It leads from the Gaza Strip to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Now, Egypt strictly controls access to its territory. They simply do not want a humanitarian crisis at their doorstep. They do not want a flood of refugees. It's not surprising, so to speak, because it's always been Egypt's position. They help with aid. However, they do not want to deal with millions of people. Now, here many experts who have been closely following the Israel-Hamas war say people will not be allowed to enter Egypt in large numbers. Besides, Egypt also has a security situation in Sinai. Now, lots of anti-government groups. In fact, in the past, Egypt had accused the Hamas of helping and sheltering such groups. Do you remember that? Now, here the Rafah border also extends downward, making it difficult for Hamas to build its tunnel structure under the border. Now, do remember, Israel dropped bombs near the crossing, so that it is more reason for the pass to be difficult to access. Now that the US has its citizens in Gaza, not just possible hostages, here we're talking about dual American Palestinian citizens. the Americans will certainly not let them just die. So it's negotiating a safe passage with Egypt. But this probably will not allow the other millions of people stuck on this strip to leave. Apart from the United States, the UK has also asked their citizens to get closer to Rafah so that they can escape when Egypt allows people to cross over. Now the US in fact has moved its second aircraft carrier to Eastern Mediterranean. Do remember that these people can stay closer to the Rafah border in the south while Israel bombs and shoots the hell out of the north in the hope that no one drops bombs, but many won't even do that because they are afraid Gaza will be taken from them, and that is what the Hamas has claimed. That is what the PLO has also said. Now at some point, with coordination with Israel, aid will be allowed through the Rafah border, but the people will likely never be allowed to leave or won't want to leave. Now, in fact, talking about what's been happening when it comes to the US citizens who are stuck at the Rafah border, the United States government has in fact advised its citizens in Gaza to move south towards the Rafah border crossing with the Egypt. And they've also asked, it's not only the US but also UK, which has asked its citizens to be ready for its possible reopening, the possible reopening of the Rafah border crossing after a Hamas attack in Israel prompted the Israeli military to retaliate and teach Hamas a lesson in its own language. The US has been working with Egypt, Israel and Qatar and trying its best to try and open the Rafah crossing, even if it is for limited hours, in order to allow the Palestinian Americans to leave. That is what a senior State Department official has also in fact told reporters while he was traveling with the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It is still not clear whether Palestinian Islamist group Hamas, which controls Gaza, would allow access to the crossing. It still remains a question whether the US citizens will be able to exit. And it is still not immediately known whether the United States would make another attempt to, in fact, get the Rafah crossing open. Meanwhile, the US Embassy in Israel has also published details of how it will attempt to evacuate people by sea from, in fact, Haifa to Cyprus tomorrow. The US government has been helping US nationals and their immediate family members who hold a valid travel document to leave Haifa via sea for Cyprus on the 16th of October, that is tomorrow. Now, the boarding will begin at around 8 a.m. and the US citizens have been asked to arrive at the Haifa Port Passenger Terminal, but not after 9 a.m. and the boarding will proceed in order of arrival and is in fact on a space-limited basis. Now, that's the latest that's coming in from the Rafah border. Israel is preparing for a potential invasion of Gaza. They have already asked the Palestinians, the 1.1 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, to evacuate because it is clear in its intentions. It is not going to pardon what the Hamas terrorists, the stunt that the Hamas terrorists carried out on Israel. It was an unprovoked war. In fact, as the Israeli officials, while speaking to the various members of the international media, have reiterated that the Israeli Defense Forces are trying their level best to minimize civilian casualties during its ongoing airstrikes and future combat operations, noting that the Hamas has a network of tunnels underneath structures occupied by civilians, making it difficult to safely attack them. Now, as such, Israel has asked Palestinian people to move out from areas as they plan to strike. Now, here, the problem is that the people do not have an easy way out. As I just mentioned, crossing over to the Sinai in Egypt are limited and the passage over to the Israeli side is closed, is obviously closed. Though negotiations continue, no new humanitarian corridors have been opened for the people of Gaza. And to add to this, the Hamas has called on the Palestinians to stay put, claiming that they will lose their homes and land if they leave. Now, those who are stuck in northern Gaza gave a limited time period to cross over to the southern part of the strip, with Israel promising limited safe movement on two routes going from the north to the south. Now, as Israel is preparing for a potential invasion of Gaza, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt stands as the sole feasible means of evacuating people from the war zone. However, the big question is, will Egypt allow refugees to in fact enter its territory? Now, it again remains uncertain whether the crossing will be functional and accessible to refugees. The Rafah border, remember, is currently closed, and it leads from the Gaza Strip to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. New 8 flights arrived in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula on Saturday, where relief materials are being held until safe passage for their delivery into the nearby Gaza Strip can be secured. Egypt says its side of the Rafah crossing that connects Sinai with the Gaza Strip remains open, though traffic has been halted for several days because of Israeli bombardments on the Palestinian side of the border. An Egyptian security source stated that Egyptian security forces have been reinforcing security on their side of the border, including by moving concrete barriers, but reports say that they were sealing off the crossing were incorrect. Now, the crossing is the main exit point for the Gaza Strip's 2.3 million residents that is not controlled by Israel. Israel and Egypt have upheld a blockade on the enclave, tightly controlling movement of goods and people since Palestinian Islamist group Hamas took control there in 2007. The Israeli military spokesperson said on Saturday that the border remains closed and any crossing to Egypt needs to be coordinated with Israel. 28 flights, including one from Turkey, arrived at Al Arish, about 45 kilometers from the Gaza border, bringing the total number of planes that have arrived this week carrying humanitarian relief for Gaza to at least 5. Amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, pro-Palestinian rallies are being carried out in many places across the globe. Around 2,000 people gathered in Sydney's Hyde Park on Sunday, many waving Palestinian flags, while hundreds of police patrolled the area and nearby streets.
Palestine will never die! Palestine will never die! Gaza, don't you cry! Gaza, don't you cry! Palestine will never die! Palestine will never die! Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Pro-Palestinian supporters also rallied in Tokyo as Israel prepares ground assault on Gaza. Take a look.
Not a conflict, not a war! Not a conflict, not a war! Palestine will never die! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Simply because the people, the 700,000 plus people that's left their home.
From Tokyo demonstration.
Message to United Nations.
Message to United Nations.
Hey! Keep open those hearts.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! Palestine!
Earlier, thousands of protesters gathered in London advocating for an end to Israel's military operations in Gaza. Take a look.
No more hiding, no more fear! No more hiding! Free Palestine!
لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله!
فتحهم الصبر والسنود والسكينة والقوة مؤكدا أن
Now, the visuals that you're seeing on your screens are from Australia, where an anti-Israel protest is being carried out. That, in fact, protests have been happening in many parts of the world, rallies to support Israel. Rallies to support, in fact, beg your pardon, the Palestinians are being carried out in various parts of the globe. Thousands are gathering at various parts of the world, be it Australia, be it London, or be it US. Their Jewish communities in the United States, France, and elsewhere are also holding protests in solidarity with Israel after the Hamas attack from Gaza. Now, that's in fact something that's a bit different from what we've seen just now. Even though there are many countries where pro-Palestinian protests are taking place, here the Jewish communities in the United States and France and elsewhere are holding rallies in solidarity with Israel after the Hamas attack from Gaza. Take a look.
Palestine!
And if anyone even begins,
Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
Over the course of the day, the Israeli Defense Forces continued to strike Hamas military targets in the Gaza Strip, including several places. Now, the targets that were struck include terror operators, operational command centers, and dozens of mortar shell launchers. During the evening, an IDF fighter jet located a building containing a number of terrorists and killed the terrorist squad. Additionally, during the afternoon, the IDF identified a number of Hamas operatives exiting a terror tunnel in the Gaza Strip. An IDF aircraft killed the terrorists and struck the terror tunnel that they exited. The IDF continues to target Hamas terrorists, organization, operatives and degrade their capabilities. After an unprovoked war that Hamas waged against Israel last Saturday, the IDF is continuing to strike Hamas military targets in the Gaza Strip. This includes various places like Jabalia, Zaytun, Al Furqan and Beit Hanwan. Now, these targets that were struck include terror operatives, operational command centers and dozens of mortar shell launchers. Do remember that the Israeli Defense Forces have given a significant blow to the Hamas, have dealt a significant blow to the Hamas after it was able to kill its many main leaders. Residents of Khan Yunis searched through the rubble of a building destroyed by an Israeli airstrike on Saturday as hope diminishes to find survivors.
It was an extremely strong explosion. We were surprised as we were asleep, my children, wife and I. When we woke up, we saw that my home and my brother's house were damaged, while the neighbours' houses had collapsed. We rushed to where the strike hit and were surprised to see that a 3-story building had collapsed and there were martyrs under the rubble. We called the medics and bulldozers to remove the rubble. Martyrs are stuck under the rubble, and until now, neither us, nor the medics, nor the civil defence are able to take them out.
Let's now take you to Israel, where my colleague Manish Jha, who is on the ground, gets us the latest from the war-torn nation. Take a look.
इस वक्त TV9 के कैमरे पर आप देखिए कि मार्क 4 टैंक में जो टैंक के सेल को टैंकिस्ट प्लेस कर रहे हैं उसको आप देखिए कि कितना बड़ा सेल है। तो आप सोचिए कि एक तरफ से जहां हमास के रॉकेट के हमले हो रहे हैं, वहीं दूसरी तरफ जो मार्क 4 टैंक के सेल से उसका जवाब दिया जाएगा और बीच बीच में जो धमाके की आवाज़ यहाँ पर बॉर्डर पर सुनाई देती है, फ्रंट लाइन पर सुनाई देती है, वहीं ठीक दूसरी तरफ देखिए अमित, दूसरी तरफ आप दिखाइए, बहुत सारे जो टैंकमैन हैं वो एक एक सेल को लेकर जा रहे हैं और उसको अपने अपने टैंकों में। तो देखिए कभी भी शुरू हो सकता है ये ऑपरेशन। कुछ घंटे के बाद हमास पर को नेस्तनाबूद करने के लिए ये ऑपरेशन जो होगा, उसके लिए देखिए अभी किस तरीके से इस टैंक में जो टैंकिस्ट हैं वो सेल को प्लेस कर रहे हैं ताकि एक साथ अटैक किया जा सकता है। आज की रात भारी पड़ सकती है हमास पर, आज की रात गाजा पट्टी पर भारी होगी। उसका सबसे बड़ा सबूत यही है कि सोल्जर अपने हिसाब से तैयारी करके उन्होंने रख लिया है, बस एक सिग्नल का इंतज़ार है। जैसे ही वो सिग्नल मिलेगा और ये कूच कर पड़ेंगे गाजा पट्टी में दुनिया के सबसे खतरनाक ऑपरेशन को अंजाम देने के लिए, जिसके बाद जैसा कि IDF का कहना है कि फिर 100 साल तक कोई भी इजराइल की सरजमी पर आक्रमण करने का हिम्मत नहीं जुटा पाएगा। यहाँ पर हम आपको उन सोल्जर्स को भी दिखाएंगे, उनसे बात भी करेंगे और उनसे जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि ग्राउंड ऑपरेशन करने से पहले वो क्या सोच रहे हैं। तो चलिए सबसे पहले मुलाकात करते हैं, बात करते हैं इसमें। हाय, दिस इज़ मनीष झा, आई एम फ्रॉम इंडिया।
Hi, Gabriel.
So Gabriel, you are here and any moment you can go for war. So before coming here, what you were doing?
Before coming here, I was working in an accountant's office, and I was doing some accounting.
So basically you are an accountant, and then when your country called you, then you are here.
Yes, that's very correct.
Hi sir, what's your good name?
Micha.
Mikha. And before coming here, what you were doing?
I'm a school teacher. I teach.
School teacher.
Yes, I teach civic studies and mathematics to the 10th grade.
And now you are having weapon.
I'm heavy weapon because that's what my country needs. I hear the call and I have to come here. Not something that I really want to do, but something that I have to do.
You know, I was in Russia last year. I saw lots of Russian citizens were leaving the country. But when I was coming to Israel, I saw lots of Israeli persons were coming back to Israel. So, do you think that this is the specialty of all Israelis? Whenever your country needs you, you are here.
Yes, as we see by the statistics, reserve soldiers are being 150% of reserve soldiers arrived. For myself, I didn't even receive a formal invitation to come here. When I saw the situation on Saturday, I took my uniform, took my bag, packed it, and although we don't have public transportation on Saturday, I asked my father to take me right down here.
Oh my God! So normally, how much time you get when you call for the duty?
It really depends. It varies. We were called up straight away. I was called up straight away, but it depends on people and it depends on the situation.
So both of you have a first experience to come at the ground zero, like Operation Zone.
Again, I'm sorry.
My question is that both of you have a first experience to do duty at Operation Zone.
Well, I didn't take any part on any formal operation. We served in the regular forces. You know, all the only the batash.
Daily operational
Daily
duty.
operational defense missions. Yeah, that's what we did.
My question is, before coming to war zone, what was your job? Like what you were doing?
My job is to prepare now for the next step. I don't know what we're going to do. I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
But we are prepared, like you see, and that's all. Israel going to win this war. Okay. All the terror going to.
Okay, and you were saying me that you have some connection with India. So
Yeah.
please tell us, what is your connection with India?
What? I didn't.
The
understand.
India link. What is your connection with India?
My father. Born in India.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember which city,
Uh-huh.
but he's born in India, and you know, I have a big connection to India.
Oh, great. So
Okay.
have you visited India?
Not because I'm here, but after I'm
Afterward, you will visit India.
Yeah, I will
Oh.
visit, and maybe we see on a cup of coffee one
Oh,
day.
great. Good
Thank
to
you
know.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just asking, so when you got information that you have to come here, so what was your reaction, your family's reaction?
So we don't have to come here because we are instructors, we are not combat soldiers. But when everything started, of course we wanted to come and help. And our families are worried, I think everyone is worried. But we know we have to do this, we have to help. So we are here.
Thousands of Palestinians fled the north of the Gaza Strip on Saturday from the path of an expected Israeli ground assault, while Israel pounded the area with more airstrikes and said it kept 2 roads open to let people escape. Listen in.
As explosions were seen on the Gaza City skyline Saturday, the Israeli military said its forces were preparing to implement a wide range of operational offensive plans with, quote, an emphasis on significant ground operations. Thousands of Palestinians continue to flee the northern Gaza Strip ahead of an expected Israeli ground assault, while Israel said it kept 2 roads open to let people escape. Outside Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was seen in a government press office video visiting troops and telling them to be ready for the next stage without elaborating. Reuters video showed paramedics and rescue teams operating in an area of northern Gaza, which was hit by an airstrike, forcing them to scramble away quickly. Israel has bombarded the Hamas-run Gaza Strip with unprecedented airstrikes after Hamas fighters stormed through Israeli towns a week ago, gunning down civilians and taking scores of hostages. Some 1,300 people were killed in Israel. More than 2,200 people have been killed in Gaza, according to authorities there. But Israel's attacks on Gaza failed to halt Hamas missile strikes deep into Israeli cities. On Saturday, rockets smashed into a greenhouse in Ashkelon and wounded 4 people at a kibbutz. Back in Gaza, crowds of foreigners hoping to escape waited at the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Egypt said its side is open, but traffic has been halted for days because of Israeli strikes. This young British girl said she is desperate to leave.
I'm really in fear. And every time I just have to have the thought of me dying in a bomb in Gaza, it's not a good thing, but it's a really scary thing for me.
A senior U.S. State Department official said the United States was working to open the crossing on Saturday to let some people out and had been in touch with Palestinian Americans who want to leave Gaza.
Israeli infantry made their first raid into the Gaza Strip on Friday since Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Several thousand Gaza residents could be seen on roads heading out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave within 24 hours. Take a look at this report.
Carrying mattresses and personal belongings, residents of Gaza City were seen walking south on Friday after Israel ordered more than 1 million people to leave the northern half of the Gaza Strip within 24 hours. Israel said troops backed by tanks had carried out raids inside the Gaza Strip Friday. That was its first announcement of a shift from an air war to ground operations in order to root out Hamas fighters a week after their deadly rampage in southern Israel. Hamas, which controls the densely populated area, told Gaza residents to stay put despite Israel's deadline. Mosques broadcast the message, "Hold on to your homes, hold on to your land." While many residents said they would not go, several thousand people could be seen on roads heading out of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, but it was impossible to tell their exact numbers. The United Nations said Israel's call for Gaza civilians, over 1 million of them, to leave was impossible to carry out, quote, without devastating humanitarian consequences. Here's UN spokesman Rolando Gomez.
The United Nations strongly appeals for any such order to be rescinded, avoiding what could transform what is already a tragic situation into a calamitous situation.
Israel rebuked the UN statement, saying it should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Since Hamas fighters burst across the barrier fence and killed 1,300 Israelis on Saturday, Israel has responded with the most intensive airstrikes of its 75-year conflict with the Palestinians. Gaza authorities say 1,800 people have been killed. The United Nations says 400,000 people have already been made homeless.
The Reuters video journalist Issam Abdullah was killed and 6 others were injured in southern Lebanon on Friday when missiles fired from the direction of Israel struck them. The Israeli army says it will investigate the death of the Reuters journalist.
The Israeli army said on Saturday that it was investigating an incident in southern Lebanon in which a Reuters journalist was killed and 6 others injured. A military spokesman said the death of Issam Abdullah was, quote, a tragic thing. A Reuters videographer who was at the scene on Friday said missiles fired from the direction of Israel struck the group. Alongside journalists from Al Jazeera and AFP, the Reuters team was providing a live video signal for broadcasters near Alma al-Shab, close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and Lebanese militia Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. While other news outlets, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, said the missiles which killed Issam Abdullah were Israeli, Reuters could not establish whether they were fired by Israel. Israel's UN envoy Gilad Erdan spoke to reporters at a briefing on Friday.
Obviously, we would never want to hit or kill or shoot any journalist that is doing his job. But, we're in a state of war. Things might happen.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the incident underlines the danger of the conflict spreading and the risks to reporters.
I want to say how much this demonstrates the enormous risk of spillover of this conflict, in relation to Lebanon. And I want to pay tribute to the journalists that so many, unfortunately, the largest number ever last year, so many journalists are paying with their lives the work they do to bring truth to everybody in the world. And I present to their families my deepest condolences.
2 other Reuters journalists, Te'er al-Sudani and Meher Nazir, who were wounded in the incident, were released from a hospital after receiving medical care.
Explosions and black smoke were seen in Gaza on Sunday. Gunfire was also heard near the northeastern border of the Gaza Strip. These are Israeli troops prepared on Sunday for a ground assault on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip as the country hit back for an unprecedented assault on its territory. Israel has vowed to annihilate the terrorist group Hamas after, on last Saturday, it fired a barrage of rockets towards the southern Israel. And that's in fact the latest that's coming in from Gaza, where gunfire in fact and explosion was heard in Gaza. Now gunfire was also heard near the northeastern border of the Gaza Strip. Explosion and black smoke, was seen in the Gaza Strip. Israeli troops are preparing for a ground assault on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. It could happen any day, any moment. And Israeli officials have time and again stated that the IDF is trying its level best to minimize civilian casualties. It has also asked people living in the north to move towards the southern side. Around 1.1 million people who are living in the north, they've been asked to vacate and move towards the southern side, even though Hamas has called on the Palestinians to stay put, claiming that they will lose their homes and land if they leave. Those stuck in northern Gaza gave a limited time period to cross over into the southern part of the strip, with Israel promising limited safe movement or two routes going from the north to the south. IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus recently provided all of us with an update on Israel's ongoing war against Hamas. Let's take a listen as to what he has to say.
I'd like to focus on the current situation. During the night, there were rockets fired at Tel Aviv and southern Israel. There is still combat in and around the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and the IDF continues to operate above the Gaza Strip and to attack different military targets belonging to Hamas. Now, we have called on the civilian population, and this isn't news, we have called on the civilian population in Gaza City and the northern part of the Gaza Strip to evacuate south of the Gaza River. And that isn't news. But what is news is that Hamas has both issued warnings to their civilians not to evacuate, and when people didn't listen to those warnings of Hamas, they have actually stopped civilians and they have stopped convoys of Gazan civilians trying to flee from the situation and listening to our warnings, knowing that they are much better off south of the Gaza River than staying in the northern part. There's a picture here on this side where you can see an aerial footage of two vehicles, these two vehicles here. That's a zoom in, and this is the same two vehicles, and you can see the line of civilian vehicles trying to go from north to south, being blocked by two other vehicles. And that corresponds with intelligence and information we have from various sources that Hamas is indeed actively preventing civilians from leaving the south. Now, if that isn't the most sinister and vile use of civilians during war, I don't know what is, but it again goes to show the lack of any value for human life with the terrorist organization Hamas. Now, there have been reports of a convoy or vehicles of Gazans that were going from north to south on Salahuddin Road, which is the main street in the Gaza Strip. Here it goes from north to south, and there were reports of Gazan casualties. Now, I'd like to say something about reports coming out of the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip, there aren't two governments there. There's one government. The government is Hamas. So when the so-called Gaza Ministry of Health issues information, the amount of people killed, if they were armed people or not, if they were men or women or children, obviously that information is authorized by Hamas. And it's okay for release by Hamas, and it would serve the purposes of Hamas. So when you get information, if you're a journalist or if you're just listening to what's going on and you get information from the Gaza Strip, please be very, very skeptical of the veracity and ask yourself, why was this information disseminated and how does it serve Hamas and its propaganda purposes? And I'd like to show you something. This is footage made by local Gazans of that incident. And you see the explosion there? We're going to zoom in. You know what? We're going to show it again, just so you can see it better. Vehicles traveling, some guy is filming, and then all of a sudden, a big explosion. Now, you can't see it now, but we've zoomed in. Actually, we haven't. People who know how to do it around the world, forensic analysis and other people, visual imagery experts, they've zoomed in and they've enlarged the area of the explosion. That's one of those pictures. And here's another picture, a little bit zoomed out, of the same very incident. They've basically isolated the frames and looked and wanted to understand where the explosion started and what it looks like. Now, I'm no forensic expert. I wouldn't be able to say if this is a roadside IED or if this is a strike from above. But what I am able to say with confidence, because we have asked, is that the IDF did not purposely strike in that area. There was no targeting of vehicles, there was no targeting of civilians, specifically because we want we don't target civilians anyhow, but specifically because we wanted people to go south. So it makes no sense for the IDF to have done it. Who would want to stop those same civilians? The same organization that did the roadblocks, Hamas. Now, again, this isn't conclusive. What is conclusive is that we for sure didn't strike on purpose. It may have been some kind of a freak accident, which I doubt, but I think that this visual imagery, and by the way, both BBC and other media outlets and many on Twitter have looked at this and analyzed it, and there are questions about what happened here and how that explosion occurred. And again, any information coming out of the Gaza Strip authorized by Hamas should be treated with extreme caution and suspicion because it serves their propaganda purposes. We are deployed, and with this I will conclude our briefing, we are deployed along the Gaza Strip with our ground forces, and we are preparing ourselves for the next stage of operations. We again call on the people of northern Gaza, Gaza City, and all the northern environment in this area here to go south, listen to our warnings. We are saying that there's going to be significant military activities here, and we urge the civilians to evacuate for their own safety. And I think it is appalling that Hamas isn't letting people to evacuate. Let that sink in, and again, in the bigger picture of things, who is on the right side, who is trying to do the right thing, and who is cynically using civilians and civilian infrastructure time and again for their vile purposes. We are trying to do the right thing, and the next stage of operations will be enhanced operations against Hamas until we will dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities.
Well, we're getting an update. The Israeli Defense Forces has said that the number of confirmed Israeli hostages being held in Gaza is 126. Now, Hamas has previously claimed that 13 hostages have been killed within Gaza by Israeli airstrikes, and it said that there were foreigners among those who died without specifying their nationalities. Now, the Israel Defense Forces have claimed that 126 hostages are being held by the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Do remember that Israel had conducted localized raids on Gaza Strip just day before yesterday evening. Now, the raids were conducted to locate these hostages, and now the IDF, they're confirming that the number of Israeli hostages that are being held captive in Gaza by the Hamas terrorists stands at 126. The terrorist organization Hamas had previously claimed that 13 hostages have been killed within Gaza by the Israeli airstrikes. Well, that's all we have in this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day ahead.
He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first?
So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
Three years after the deadly Galwan clashes, India has doubled the pace of infrastructure creation on the border. India's Border Road Organization is accomplishing mission impossible, creating infrastructure to secure us from our foes across the Himalayas.
Look at China. They don't have to climb up like us. Once they are on the Tibetan plateau, the construction work, the maintenance work, everything is fairly easy.
On India's 77th Independence Day, an all-women unit of Border Roads Organization led by Colonel Ponung Dobing inaugurated the world's highest motorable road. Ladakh is strategically important for India. It is the only place where the Indian Army faces both its adversaries. Ladakh is a high-altitude desert. Temperatures of -20 to -30 degrees and low oxygen levels here make survival tough. Being stationed in the sensitive eastern Ladakh sector is a tough but prestigious assignment. It is a matter of national pride that infrastructure development along the LAC is being looked after by the daughters of India. In such challenging circumstances, 3 stars twinkle the brightest here. They are the women officers of the highest border roads task force in the world.
All the BRTF, whether it's gentlemen or women, this is the highest BRTF in BR.
We have got the opportunity, and it's the challenges that boosting us up to work in such a place.
उनको भरोसा है कि हम लोग कर लेंगे. Right now we are sitting at above 15,000 feet above mean sea level. My BRTF is 755 BRTF. My BRTF approximately handling construction of approximately 201 kilometer roads, new roads. Maintenance of 205 kilometer roads, as I told you, and in construction of 4 important bridges connecting Hanle to the remote villages. Very important is Neoma LG, which will be, once constructed, highest airfield in the world.
So in terms of the experience, till now, it's been just 1 month. The working situation here is a bit tough. During the summer, it's okay, but during the winter, it's very tough here, which I haven't experienced yet. I have to experience, but the temperature goes down below minus degree.
नेशन के हिसाब से बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स है जो हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं जिन पे उनको भरोसा है कि हम लोग कर लेंगे मतलब वुमेन कर सकते हैं इसलिए हमें दिया गया है
Earlier, women officers were not given leadership roles in the RCC, which is Road Construction Company. Since beginning, I have propagated a gender-neutral approach in my organization, and women are treated with equal dignity and equal rights are given to them as male counterparts. So we searched all our records, and all the women who are due for high altitude or hard areas, we consulted them and they were posted accordingly.
So I'm with Colonel Ponung Doming, Anamika Anand and Obin Taki, and we are heading towards a few projects that the highest women task force in the world is handling. And right now we are on our way to the highest motorable road, that is Umlingla.